Hello there, I'm Marina Mahathir. Welcome to Busy Reading Books, a podcast where we'll explore the world through words, featuring some of my favorite books and authors. Now, I'm just sitting here in my what we call my family room, my TV room, and I have a huge bookshelf of books. And lately, I've been looking at it and thinking, should I clear it out? Should I give away some of these books? Because they're taking up a lot of space. Whatever it is, books take up a lot of space. And there are people like Books on the Move who are doing this programs where you can exchange books, where you can give away books and things like that. So I thought I would need to Marie Kondo my books and give away some. But the thing is, as I was looking through, there's so many of my books that give me joy. And so it's very hard to get rid of them. So I thought that one way of, doing something with these books is really to talk about them, because I know there are lots of podcasts about books, but I don't know whether it's ever enough. So let's have one where, I talk about the books I like and what I've been reading, and the thing that I thought would make it different was that will be thematic, in that I don't want to be like the regular book club where everybody needs to read one book and then we discuss that book. I just can't do that, because I can't read a book in a week, for instance, and then talk about it. So I thought what would be more interesting is if we did a podcast that was much more thematic. For instance, in 1 week, we could talk about Asian writers, or specifically Malaysian writers, books and their books. And another week would be Indian writers. Another week would be, this new emerging Japanese or Chinese or Korean writers. I mean, has anyone read them? I've only read one, but I know there are some that are extremely popular with people. For instance, Haruki Murakami, whom I haven't read. And whether these translations actually work, and whether we find them a bit odd, because obviously they must express a worldview that's quite different from what we're normally used to. Or another week we could do Latin American books. And I'm also thinking of doing, like for instance, we could do 1 week or 2 weeks talking about biographies. And one would be about biographies of politicians, since there's a lot of them on my bookshelf. I have Nelson Mandela, Bill Clinton, and I have on my audiobooks, I have Barack Obama, I have Mary Trump's book about her uncle. I have, Michelle Obama is not a politician. So I thought we would separate them into politicians and non-politicians. And maybe even men and women. See if there are different ways that men and women talk about politics. We could do a session actually on audiobooks. Do you prefer it, or do you not? I've been going into audiobooks lately, mostly because I need so badly to catch up with my reading, and I find it nowadays really hard to just sit down and read a whole book. And this is another topic, like, can you finish a whole book nowadays? Because it requires really sitting down and trying to, focus on one thing for a long time. It's very hard when you have, all sorts of other distractions like your phone. So I thought I would combine it, and I would listen to an audiobook, which I can do while I'm doing my makeup, or while I'm walking, I'm doing my walks, or something like that. It kind of, I'm one of those people who, if I can do 2 things at one time, I will. So there you go. And then I thought another time we could talk about books about food. Not just cookbooks, not just recipes. We're not going to just compare recipes, although we could. But, the books that talk also about culture and, history and all that. I mean, they're really books that are just wonderful to have. I mean, I'm not a great cook, but I love collecting cookbooks. Partly to just go through the recipes and dream about how they might taste without me actually making them, but also about all the cultural stuff that they reveal. So, I have a book from Burma, for example, which a Burmese friend gave me because I said I like that Burmese noodles, mohinga or something. So yeah, I haven't tried it, but it looks like a beautiful book. I just love beautiful cookbooks. That's it. So that might be a one to talk about, or there could be books about travel, not guidebooks per se, but books that talk about going from one place to another. For instance, there was I think, is it called The Great Patagonia Express by Paul Theroux, which I read mainly because I went to Patagonia. And I'm glad I read it after I went to Patagonia because The Great Patagonia Express is about going to Patagonia and it finishes off in Patagonia and it doesn't actually talk about Patagonia, which to me was a great disappointment because I loved Patagonia. And maybe there is another book. I think maybe Bruce Chatwin or something. But the trouble with all these books, I find, and here I'm giving a preview of, what I might say in that particular podcast, is that these white men, they go on these trips and they really pass judgment on the local people there and they hardly ever hang out with them. And they, like Bruce Chatwin, only talks about the white settlers in Patagonia, which to me is really curious. Like, there are people there who've been there a long time. So why not talk about them? But anyway, that's one of the issues. So travel books in that vein, and I'm sure there are plenty that other people have read that talks about going from a place to another and what it reveals about themselves and the place. Memoirs. I love memoirs. And besides, memoirs are slightly different from biographies because biographies start where I was born in, 1910 or whatever and goes on until, they die. But memoirs sometimes are about specific, occasion in a person's life. For example, it could be about a childhood, could be, my life during the war, or my life with dad, that sort of thing. And so they really talk about a particular time in a person's life. And I'm particularly interested in this because I'm writing a memoir right now, which I can't tell you about until it's done. But it's very interesting because memoir, there's this debate about whether memoirs are accurate or not because your memory may not be accurate. Um, and and some novels are like memoirs too, and they must be based on something. So this whole thing, I did a course on the nonfiction novel, how some novels are written as if they're nonfiction, and you can't actually tell whether this is true or not. You kind of have to believe the author when he says it's not true. You just have to hang on to his word, which I find interesting. We could do books set in particular places, for instance, in London or Paris or Istanbul or Kabul or, Afghanistan, like what's his name? Khalid Hosseini, is it? What's his name? Um, and all these exotic places. And you remember there was this guy who did 3 Cups of Tea, Greg Mortensen, which was a huge bestseller until it turned out that it was all faked, especially his second book, which I forget what it was called, where he said he was kidnapped or something like that. So yeah, that was a really interesting book, but it was quite evocative, if I remember, of Afghanistan and what it was like to be there under the Taliban. We could also do feminist books which are, really out and out feminist. From Marilyn French's The Women's Room, which I read in my early 20s, and it really changed me. I mean, it really made me understand about male privilege and power, and turned me, really set me on the way. If it didn't turn me immediately, it set me on the way to being a feminist. Right all the way to, like, right now, Bernardine Evaristo's Women, A Girl, Woman, Other, which I think is just brilliant and totally deserves the Booker Prize, even though she had to share it with Margaret Atwood. I didn't read The Handmaid's Tale, so I have no idea how good it is and whether it should have been shared with Bernardine Evaristo. But there you go. There was a big controversy about that. First time a black woman wins and she has to share it. That sort of thing. And we could talk about some religion. I don't mean we should talk about the Bible or the Quran, but books about them, like Karen Armstrong, for instance, who has written a lot of books about religion. She's an expert on many religions. She was a Catholic. She almost became a nun, and then she came out, and then she studied all these other religions and wrote a book about Islam, which is very, very sympathetic to Islam, which is really good. And I find her incredibly enlightening. I've seen her speak twice, one in KL and one in London. The KL one was quite funny because her books were actually banned when she was here, which is really silly. And then there's Reza Aslan, No God But God. That's what he wrote. He's got an interesting background. From what I understand, he's originally Iranian, migrated to the US, didn't have much religion, became a Christian as a teenager, and then went to do a master's or PhD in Islam because someone said there's a gap there, and we need to know more about Islam, and then converted and became a Muslim, and has written terrific books. No God But God is just brilliant. It's really good. And everyone should read it. So, things like that kind of come in an indirect way. It's not theological in a way. It's more, I don't know how to describe it, but that means there's a lot to talk about. Like, what are these books really? What are they trying to do? And I would be happy if someone could suggest books on other religions, Buddhism or Hinduism, whatever. I think there are a lot of misunderstandings about those religions. So, yeah. So that's my idea for this podcast. And I hope it will be interesting to some. And I don't want it to be too long because I don't think people really need more than, like, say, I don't know, 20 minutes. I don't know. And it would be great if I could do some interviews. I mean, I do have some author friends, and it would be great if I could include some interviews of them as well. So there you go. That's my big idea. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to check out Zafigo.com for more travel inspiration. Until next time.